Yo, what's up, man?
What is up?
Ooh, baby.
Bro, I'm hyped.
Me too.
I'm hyped. I got my coffee. It's been about a week since we've chatted, and I missed my friend, my Pixelist buddy.
I miss you too, dude. And we got a heck of an episode to talk about. Welcome to the Pixelist podcast, where we talk about basically all the things we like: video games, movies, TV shows. In this case, Exandria Unlimited, the D&D live stream Twitch campaign from the folks over at Critical Role. And man, tonight we're going to be talking about episode 5. Man, what did you think? What did you think?
I loved it. I mean, literally, my wife, who knows nothing about Critical Role, doesn't usually watch Critical Role. She was glued to the TV with me. Like, both of us were just like, oh, dang. Like, this is getting really intense. So, loved it. By the way, if you're new to watching this, I'm Blake. By the way, I'm one of the one of the show hosts.
My bad. So. I'm Will. Forgot to do the introductions.
Who are we? What'd you think? What'd you think about the episode?
I liked it too, man. I feel like it's really hitting its stride.
Totally agree.
Like it's what's the film snob term? It's like the rising action. I feel like we're like steadily hitting that, and like so many things are coming to bear soon. I really liked it. Really excited for the direction it's going, and these last 3 episodes we have left, I think, are all going to be kind of action packed.
Am I the only one who feels apprehensive, like, as to where this goes? Like, I'm genuinely worried about our characters, and we'll talk about this later, but you sent me a picture that just like put a pit in my stomach. Yeah. I'm just like, oh, I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really has hit its stride. And we've talked about every episode, and I've mentioned how I had some personal criticisms in the first episode and the second episode. I'm sure people are gonna like discount me now because I'm gonna be like unapologetically like fanboy, but zero criticisms. I'm really loving the show, really enjoying it. I love the style, I love the feel of it. Love Abria, love Robbie and Amy. It is feeling really good right now.
Agreed. I feel like everyone's really kind of found their role, and everything's firing off on all cylinders now. Yeah, love the app. Probably one of my favorites. It's still probably tied with, I don't know, between 3 and I guess this was 5. Those are the toss up for me, but it was, I don't know how many times we can say it, but really good episode.
Anyone who like comes for the first time, they're like, and they always talk about how much they love the shows they watch. And well, I mean, we just pick good content. We don't want to like pick some random show that like episode 3, we still hate it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just not who we are. So talking about the shows and movies, games, stuff like that we love, and EXU is one of them. So great episode for me as well. Episode 4 is probably my ultimate favorite right now.
Still your favorite?
My wife and I, she hadn't seen the back half of episode 4. I don't think she saw really much of episode 4 at all. But we went and watched the pageant again, and I mean, she just thought it was the best thing.
That was great.
Well, should we dive into our recap?
Yeah. Let's do it. And for those of you that are new, we like to do a little bit of a in-depth recap to keep you caught up on this long-form content. And we actually spliced this up, uploaded it separately, so for ease of access there. So hello, if you're watching that recap and you're interested in hearing our full discussion on the episode, we'll link that below. So please check that out too if you're interested. But yeah, I guess let's just dive right into it. Episode 5 of Exandria Unlimited, a test of worth. Okay. So basically, the episode starts off where we left last time, with everyone still in Byroden, after this pageant, and they've had their fun, and now it's time to be back on our mission, which is to head to the ruins of Cunara, which I still am apprehensive about pronouncing because I feel like I'm not doing it right.
We just need to embrace the quinceañera.
Yeah, they're on the way to the ruins of Quinceañera. And basically, Abria is like, hey, is anything you guys wanted to do before we, trek out? And the one funny moment is Robbie is like, can I keep the shirt he wore in the pageant? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And he's like stuffs it away, like pretty excited. But then Opal, the main thing that happens is Opal is like, like maybe we should say goodbye to my dad. But like the moment that happens, the pendant that she wears just breaks. The clasp breaks, and her gemstone like falls into the ground. And she's like, "Oh gosh, like what's happening?" And Fern basically helps her fix it because they're like, we got to get this fixed. And so Fern takes a ribbon, basically makes her a ribbon necklace out of it. And while Fern's touching it, she feels like a warmth emanating from it. And she's like, wow, this is like such a lovely piece of jewelry. And Opal's like, yeah, it can be. And Fern, Fern hands it back to Opal. And basically, as soon as Opal touches it, it's like back to being ice cold. And Rai is kind of picking up on like the subtleties here, and realizes that there's something going on with Opal that she's not maybe fully revealing, and Rai reveals in this moment that like, hey, I actually have a twin sister too, so maybe I'm getting twin vibes from you right now. But I had a twin named fy'ra Kai, and it was my sister that I was meant to protect and ultimately was unable to. And she reveals that her twin sister has died. And so she kind of launching off from that perspective is like, hey, Opal, like if there's something you need to fix with your sister, if there's something you need to say to her, say it because you never know, if this is the last chance you're gonna get. And so Opal's like, right now in front of everybody? And they're like, oh, we can go away. And then she's like, no, I'll do it. And so she leans in, like to the pendant, which, is seemingly this connection between her and Ted. And he's like, hey, thanks for giving my powers back. And where are you? And Abria has her roll, I think, an Arcana check, and she rolls super poorly. And she's met with no answer. And she mentions that she doesn't feel like barred off from Ted, but there's just no answer, and she's not really sure why. And so Opal's like, hey, if you're giving me the silent treatment, I'm really upset, and that's very petty. But if you're in trouble, know that I'm here for you. I've gotten pretty good with my daggers, and I've got these strong friends. So, like, we're here to help if you need. But still, she is given no answer. And so the party decides to kind of move on from this, but we do, since everyone's talking about their siblings, we do learn in this moment that Dariax also has a brother, and he just mentions that he's 2 inches taller than him, which I'm sure is very important for dwarven people.
Dwarven people.
And he basically says that his brother's like the opposite of him. He like his
Right.
Dariax is always getting in trouble. His brother was like the good one, and was always getting Dariax out of trouble. But yeah, other than that, they hit the road, and they briefly try to think of a group name for themselves, but no one has any good ideas, basically, and they're like, all right, we'll keep marinating on this, but it's something on all of their minds. But yeah, so they hit the road, and fy'ra Rai once again uses her gift to ask, like, how long is this journey going to be? And it's basically revealed that they've got a few weeks of travel ahead of them, and I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I love you mentioned the low roll. I think if we were going to summarize this episode, it's like the episode of like natural ones,
Yes,
and like sub 5. So anytime there's an important check, just know they roll a 1, basically. But anyway, so they're on this journey, they're traveling, and they decide to make camp. And everyone basically goes to sleep for the night. And then Dariax has a dream. And like we've seen in previous episodes where the circlet has sort of reached out to different people individually, we see the same thing happen here. Dariax wakes up. He's in this open field. His friends are nowhere to be found. And it's pitch black with like this big purplish storm that's brewing above him. And he's kind of freaked out, like calling for people like, hey, where are you guys? Well, suddenly the earth it's almost like a mini earthquake. These tremors happen and the ground fissures. And in the distance, he sees this massive crack that opens up and these 2 arms come out of it. And not the rest of the body, just these 2 fleshly arms. And they have this, think of it as like if you're collecting firewood almost. It's basically this pile of bramble and thorns and twigs that it's holding in its hands, and it's starting to, I think of it like a person like wrapping like a sound cord around their arm. It's starting to wrap this bramble around its arm, and as it's doing it, the thorns and the branches are basically tearing at its flesh, and it's a very like uncomfortable scene. and it's basically shaping the bramble into a circlet. Well, Dariax is totally freaked out by this, and he decides just to run. So he turns, he runs, and can't see. It's kind of like one of those dreams, like where you're running away, but you're not making any headway. And the arms aren't getting any farther behind him. And finally, he ducks behind, I think, like a small rock or something. And he starts to hear this voice talking to him. And it's this voice. We don't know if it's the circlet. We don't know if it's the Spider Queen. But this voice talks to him, and it's kind of like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm, what is happening here? What's going on? And he starts to have this conversation with this entity that is basically sort of goading him to think more about the circlet, sort of asking him about, who he is and what does he want to accomplish. And Dariax is very suspicious of this voice and can kind of discern that this probably isn't someone to be trusted. And he eventually says, like, I don't want to have this conversation anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I think I just want to wake up now. He's freaked out.
Yeah.
And the voice is basically, when he says, I want to just wake up, I'm done. The voice says, you're boring. You're just a boring person. Forget it. So he wakes up. He sees his friends. They're all asleep. And he goes over to Dorian. And to Dorian, he basically wakes him up and says, Dorian, I had a bad dream. Dorian's like, okay. And Darian's like, yeah.
Was it the one about the big dwarf lady?
Yeah, right. He's like, no.
It's not that one.
Not that one. And basically says, hey, can we sleep back to back tonight? And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So they lay down. Well, Dariax forgets that the crown is in his satchel up against now Dorian's back. And Dorian begins to feel really sick. And they're like, oh, right, the circlet, duh. And as they're basically talking about this, other people start to wake up because of the chatter. And basically, eventually, everyone wakes up and they start talking to Dariax on, hey, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And Dariax is like, oh, I had a bad dream. They're like, well, what's dream about? And he's like, I think it was the Spider Queen. And like immediately everyone's like freaked out. And Orem especially is really like perturbed by this. Mm-hmm. And he's like, guys, we have a real problem on our hands. Like, this thing is affecting us. We can't leave it here in the middle of nowhere. We can't take it with us. And as this conversation is happening, fy'ra is like, hey, what are you guys even talking about? Because up to this moment, they've never told her they have the vestige on them. Well, once she starts to press on this, Dorian, who, by the way, Abria has him make a couple of different rolls, and he rolls poorly. It seems like the crown is beginning to affect Dorian more than just feeling sick. He starts to feel this ringing sensation, this buzzing feeling in him, and almost this sense of paranoia against fy'ra. And so as fy'ra is asking these questions, he's like, it's none of your business, which is very different from how he's acted as sort of this charming, I think, bardic fellow.
Right.
He's like, it's none of your business. Like, butt out. This group is the five of us, and you're just here for the ride. Well, they're all kind of sort of thrown by his hostility, but fy'ra is just like, no, okay, whatever. And Dorian finally is like, okay, fine, it's a vestige of divergence. And she's like, well, wow, that's really serious. All I know is that my job is to protect you guys. And Dorian is still very sort of catty with her. And eventually they just decide, you know what, let's just put the circlet in the middle of the campsite, and we'll just go to sleep, and we'll just keep it away from all of us. So they go to sleep. Dorian then has a dream. He's in the same open field with the storm. And he actually sees fy'ra in front of him being, it's kind of confusing how it's described, sort of being standing there with these dark, cloudy tendrils that are sort of encompassing her and almost like swallowing her.
Yeah.
And he is basically like, what's going on? Where am I? What's happening? And he hears the same voice that spoke to Dariax that basically starts to talk to him and have a conversation with him and even ask him, hey, I'm looking for a champion. Will you help me? And it's presumably a champion to maybe even wear the circlet. Well, Dorian says basically, yes, I'll give you a champion if you leave my friends alone. And this is interesting to the voice. The voice says, okay, I'm intrigued. Who would you give me? And he says, I'll give you Pasca. And so the voice considers it for a moment and says, would you really give me Pasca, knowing all that she wants to do with this, what she would do with the circlet, and ultimately the chaos and destruction she would cause in Iman and its citizens? Would you really do that? And he says, yes, I would. Like, for my friends, I would. And the voice laughs and it's kind of like, this is interesting. and basically says Posca's too far away. She won't serve as a good champion, but I'm really intrigued by what you've told me. And she also says, hey, by the way, there's this part of your memory that I can see that you can't see. Do you want me to return it to you? And Dorian's like, yes, I do. And we're talking ultimately about this pre-episode 1 memory lapse that a lot of us, we haven't known what happened here.
Right.
And he says, yeah, I do want to know. And she says, do you really? Like, basically tells him, I want you to beg. And he's like, yes, please do it. And so as he falls back to sleep, this entity restores his memory, and it's revealed that fy'ra also has the memory of this event and has actually known what happened prior to week 1 this entire time. She hasn't been totally forthcoming about it. Yeah. So they wake up in the morning. Dorian actually gets near the satchel of Dariax's and doesn't feel sick. He actually asks Dariax, who Dariax, by the way, has taken a bunch of Byroden pies with him, and says, hey, can I get one of those pies? And everyone's kind of like, hey, aren't you kind of sick being near the satchel? And he's like, no, I feel fine. And Abria actually tells us that his alignment has changed now from chaotic good to chaotic neutral, ultimately because of his decision to, I would give the crown up to Posca. Opal and Fern notice that there's something different about him. Fern in particular notices this and decides to say nothing. And the party continues on again, back into on the journey. So, by the way, I don't know if you can hear my kid crying in the background, but I'm not abusing my kid. She just is having a bad day. Anyway, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, okay. So, the camp, they pack up camp, hit back on the road. I did want to mention one thing about the memory that was restored. We aren't given much, but we were told that they apparently were all together in the Feywild.
Yes.
And fy'ra did some sort of like sacrifice play that let everyone else escape through a portal, and that the memory that they all lost that now Dorian, I guess, has, and fy'ra never lost. So very interesting.
Yes.
So they're back on the road, going to these ruins, and they eventually get to a point in the jungle where it's too thick for the wagon to continue. So they get out, and there's a touching moment between Dariax and the horses. He has like a single tear shed down his face as he's like, are they going to be okay? Can they get out? And they make some sort of check, and they realize that these horses are kind of more than meets the eye. They're like magical, and they do know their way back, and they will be fine. And they take off.
Which I imagine Abria just being like, no, they're going to die horrific. You'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
So they get off on foot now, traveling deeper in, and it's interesting that fy'ra this whole time has some sort of like knowledge about this place. She knows a lot more than she's letting on, and it's been kind of the theme with her this whole time. But she keeps like touching vines and like using her gift, and she's got some sort of deeper connection that hasn't really been fleshed out yet. But she's like letting them know that like, hey, where we're going, make your intentions clear, and basically being kind of vague. But anyway, so they continue on, and they eventually reach this clearing in the jungle, where there is this large stone like obelisk that has lots of runes on it, runes that are reminiscent of the one from the ash hole, aka the whole reason they're here, to try to figure out what's going on.
Props for saying that without breaking stride, by the way.
Appreciate that. And so they're like, okay, let's check this out. This might be what we need. And so as they're kind of approaching, Orum's like, hey, hold on. And they notice that there's these kind of like, not ominous plants, but these plants that are, maybe there's a little more to them than meets the eye. And they basically discern that, because Orum's familiar with them, that these plants are dangerous and to like stay away from them because they're bad news. So they basically try to figure out what they should do here, and eventually Dariax is like, hey, Dorian, boom, I cast invisibility on you, with the plan being that he'll just walk up to the obelisk invisible and be able to get the information they need. Dorian's like, well, one good turn deserves another. He's like, I cast invisibility on you. And so Dorian makes Dariax invisible, but him doing that action removes his own invisibility. So now we just have Dariax that's invisible. So like, okay, Dariax has to do this. So they give him the pen and pad and shoot him off toward the obelisk. And what no one really figured out is that plants don't have eyes, so being invisible doesn't really mean anything to them. So Dariax still sets them off, and he smells fruity pebbles, we're told, and just can't resist and runs to the plants. But Orem is able to nimbly dart in there like a ninja and kind of kick some sense into him
Mhm.
before he's able to reach the plant and is like, "Hey, buddy, obelisk is that way." Um, so Dariax is back on track, and as he's making his way nearer to it, we start to hear another voice in Dariax's head, and it's not the Spider Queen. We're not told who it is at this point. But this voice asks Dariax, "Why are you here? Like, what do you want?" And Dariax very earnestly is like, "I'm here to copy these runes, uh, to help my friends." And the voice is basically like, "What would you do if I told you you couldn't, or turned you back?" And he's like, "Well, I mean, I guess we'd leave." And he's like, "But I really need these runes to help my friends. Like, I'm trying to help." And he basically reveals like, well, these aren't the runes you want. These runes are kind of like a lie, and really deeper in this forest are the answers you seek. And he's like, "Okay, well, can I still copy these runes?" And she's like, "Okay, sure, you can copy those runes." And so he goes to do that, and basically this voice then pops in everyone's head except for fy'ra. But she's again is seemingly aware of that this was going to happen because she's like, "Hey, everyone, be earnest and stuff." So she knew this was coming, and so she is not questioned, but everyone else is, and everyone generally gives the same type of answer. She asks them, "Why are you here?" And blah blah blah, basically the same thing we just went over, but a couple notable exceptions, or at least differences here, is that when
Mhm.
she speaks to Opal, she asks, "Why are you here? Like, why are y'all here?" A plural, and
Mhm.
referring to Opal and Ted. And Opal's like, "Ted's not here." And the voice is like, you, "No, she's here." And Opal's like, "No, she's not here. She's probably like in a library somewhere." And the voice is like, you know that's not true."
Mhm.
And she basically forces Opal to like reconcile with the fact that she doesn't know where Ted is. And this voice actually kind of, in a moment of like clarity, shows her that like in some form or fashion, like Ted is in her. And Opal's like, "Did I swallow her?" And she's like, "No, that's not how this works." But like, Ted is inside of you, and she kind of gives her a glimpse of like inside herself, and she can
Mhm.
see Ted looking at someone who's looking at her, but we're not given any information as to who that is. And so Opal's like, "Okay, well, like, how do I fix this?" And the voice is like, "I'm not the one that did this to you, so I'm not the one that can fix it." Um, and then she kind of launches into the "Why are you here?" But she has been asking everyone else. And again, like I said, everyone basically gives the same answer. They're trying to help people. But then Dorian is asked, and he again, kind of says the same thing, that we're here to get these runes because we need them. And the voice is like, "Well, what if I prevented that? Or what if I like made you leave?" And Dorian's like, "Well, if we have the runes, cool. I don't care. We're happy to leave. But if we don't have what we need yet, then that's going to be a problem."
Mhm.
And nothing comes of this, but it's just interesting because Dorian is the only one of the party to kind of like push back on
Right.
that a little bit. So, um, ultimately, Dariax finishes his rune rubbings and makes his way back, and the voice enters his head again and is like, "Good job. Now here, a final test." And in that moment, a big Feywild-esque crocodile comes out from the woods, and they all basically roll initiative and have to fight this thing. And combat's pretty funny because Amy, as Opal, lets everyone know that, hey, like if we flip this gator on its back, he'll become paralyzed. And so that becomes the game plan as they're all trying to get this gator up on its back. And Opal ultimately uses her whip and rolls really well and is able to like
Natural
wrap.
20, I
Oh, it
think.
was a natural 20? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Abria was really pissed off.
She rolls it around and like basically jumps over and like, in a amazing feat of strength is able to flip this gator. And the party members that are paying attention, Abria says that like Opal kind of blurs in that moment, and you can see another girl who looks like her but is not exactly her. And we know that to be Ted, and you can
Right.
kind of see both of them in that moment working together um, to successfully flip the gator. So they do it, and they don't kill it. They just kind of, once they've got it to submission, they leave it alone. They have passed the test, and even a few of them come and give it a belly rub because it wasn't evil or hostile. It was just, a creature serving
Mhm.
this purpose of being a test. Um, so they ask, after they've got that settled, they're like, "Yo, Dariax, did you get the runes?" He's like, "Yeah, I got them." And he shows them to them, and he actually walks over and decides to touch it because I think they asked him like, "Well, did anything happen when you touched it?" He's like, "Oh, I didn't touch it." And so he runs over and touches it, and he is like, his mind is filled with all this information. It's almost like census data, or basically just like bureaucracy, bureaucracy, bureaucracy. Just lots of like information. And he's like, "Oh, it's super boring." And Dorian's like, "What?" And so Dorian goes and touches it, and he too is given this massive influx of information. And we're told that this, it like represents a city of perhaps like 1 million people. Like this is massive, and something deeper is going on here. And so at that point, they're like, since the voice had spoken to many of them and told them that they needed to go deeper to find the truth, they're all like, "Well, I guess we're going to go deeper." And they basically set off to do just that. If
Yeah. So after that, just wrapping up this recap, they have a second break for camp, basically, and as they are sort of relaxing and dozing off, Dorian actually turns to Dariax and says, "Hey, do you want me to hold the circlet for a little bit? That's a lot for one person to bear." And I kind of got Sam and Frodo vibes of like, Sam being like,
yes,
I want to carry it. So Derek's is like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So he hands him the satchel with a circlet in it. And Orem actually immediately sort of steps in and basically says, "Give the dwarf back the circlet or we're going to have a problem here." And it just like immediately just cuts the mood. I mean, everyone's kind of just like, "Whoa."
yeah,
And Dorian's like, "Whoa." Like, seriously, like what's the big deal? And Orem basically says, like, this is a serious journey for us. Like, we need to be able to trust everyone. And he basically says, "I don't trust you with the circlet." Because Orm's been particularly perceptive on noticing that Dorian, whether it's his personality, something's a little different about Dorian. And so Dorian's finally like, okay, fine. Yeah, what's the big deal? Like, why are you making such a big deal about this? Hands it back to Dariax. Fern actually offers to carry it as well, and she actually does hold it briefly, but her fingernails immediately start to turn black, and it freaks her out. So she hands it back to Dariax. So they're talking about this. They're talking about this conversation, and basically they decide to try to lighten the mood. And so Fern brings out her pan flute and begins playing. She's like, "What should I play? I know, hot cross buns." And in theme with the entire episode, she rolls very poorly. And so it's this very off tune, hot cross buns. Meanwhile, fy'ra, and this is sort of the last moment of tension flaring. fy'ra is sort of looking at Dorian and noticing that something's different. And they're also trying to keep the mood light by talking about their group name again. And so they throw out a couple of options. Dorian particularly mentions, these are really great options for the five of us, and sort of shoots a glare at fy'ra again. And fy'ra, as she's listening to this, watching this, we hear her seem to use her gift to say, "I know Dorian's changed. I know if he had to make the same decision twice, he wouldn't." Sort of pleading with this voice to say, like, no, he's different now. And we're not quite sure what she's referring to, whether that's the she's intuitive to him deciding to give the crown to Pasca, or something that maybe happened in the Feywild. We'll talk about it more later in this episode. But eventually, though, the party drifts off to sleep. Opal has a dream. Ted's beside her, and she's immediately like, "Ted, are you dead?" And Ted's like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, are you dead?" And she's like, "No, that's insane. Why would I be dead?" She's like, "Oh, well, then where are you? Like, what's going on?" And she's really like, this has all come from this conversation with this voice from before that's been like, she's with you.
yeah,
And Ted, probably for the first moment, has this sort of moment of self-awareness of like, I don't really know. I just know I'm with you and I don't remember what happened. I don't know where my body is. I just know that I'm here. And Opal says, "Are you okay?" And Ted says, "Well, are you okay?" And Opal's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, then I'm okay." And so they have sort of like this awe moment. They hug, they're laughing. And then Ted all of a sudden says, "Do you see her?" And Opal's like, "Who?" And she looks off past the campsite and says, "Do you see the woman in the purple cape?" And she's like, "No, I don't see anybody." And that's really the last of their dream, but it leaves us as the viewers like, "Whoa, what?" So everyone's still sleeping. Fern also has a dream, and it's in line with the same types of dreams that Dorian and Darius had. It's an open field, it's dark, stormy, cloudy. And there's this mirror there, and I think of it as almost like a mirror that's like the Fey Gate that they saw earlier.
Yeah.
She walks up to it, and in the mirror, she sees Dark Fern standing on the other side. And Dark Fern's there with the same type of dialogue we saw in the previous episode, basically goading her to put on the circlet. And Fern says, "Will it help me find Mama and Papa?" And she says, "Yes." And she's like, "Well, so I just put it on and I'll know?" And she says, "No. But if you put it on, you'll have the power you need. You'll have the strength you need to find them." So Fern thinks for a moment and she says, "Well, there can really only be one Fern, and I don't really like this version of me. So I think I want to wake up now." And so she throws her cloak over the mirror and eventually dozes off to sleep, and the mirror vanishes. And then the scene cuts to Orem, who is revealed that he hasn't been sleeping this entire time. He's been pretending to sleep to sort of let the party drift off. And once everyone's fallen asleep, he gets up and he patrols a little bit, but he really just watches watches Dorian because, and Liam O'Brien even says this, that he's very suspicious of Dorian and untrusting of what's going on with Dorian. So really just watches Dorian, and eventually he too falls asleep. And that is where our episode ends. Not before Abria gives us a one final comment on, she mentions that elsewhere in the jungle is a woman who is broken and bleeding, who's traveling through the jungle alone. And it's Murata, the elf from Singorn, who arrived at the Fey Gate in the previous episode. She's holding the residuum spike and she's pushing through the foliage. And it's very clear that she's making her way towards the party. And she too is wearing a purple cloak. And that is episode 5 of Exandria Unlimited.
Ooh, what a stinger at the end there.
Right?
Yeah.
And so much to talk about. We got through that one in about just shy of 30 minutes, which it's so hard to keep these things brief. I'd love to know if you watch this whole recap, if you're watching our deep dive episode right now, I would love to know if you like a shorter format, if you like it how it is. You know, our goal is really to cleave it down to around like maybe 15 or 20 minutes. But as you can tell, there's so much crazy stuff happening. It's like, how do we really cover all this? So anyway, would love to know what you guys think. But yeah, it's episode 5.
Ooh.
Where to begin?
I know I don't know. I don't know where to begin. It doesn't matter. I guess we could start with what we just talked about there. If we want to try to start at the beginning, we could do that. Do you have any preference?
Yeah, we could talk about, you're talking about with Dorian and the circlet, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that was definitely the running theme of, we have Dorian's alignment even change, which I think you've mentioned that Matt Mercer in the main campaign, they don't really talk alignment so much.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of a flair of DM differences, a little bit of a Bria style, which I like how she's characterized this, of really helping us as the viewer understand that this is someone who's deeply, innately changing
right
on their core level. And we're even seeing, I was really annoyed that Robbie shaved his beautiful beard, but it's a bit symbolic of his character is changing.
Okay.
We see him a bit more abrasive, a bit more threatening. What's going on with Dorian in this episode?
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack here because this leads to so many things, but I'll try to stay on one track for now. Yeah, I mean, he seemingly is doing it in service of, in his mind, something good, right? He wants to protect his friends. So it's not
Right.
as if he's just like making this sinister turn where he has like his own
Right.
objectives and wants the crown for power and stuff. No, he's doing it to help his friends, but obviously it is a very iffy choice considering he might be damning thousands, tens of thousands, who knows how many people to death or or worse. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely he's taken such a keen interest in it very quickly, and like I wonder. My question is, do you think in that moment where he tried to be like, "Hey, I'll carry it for a while," do you think that there was something more to that? Do you think it was him just trying to take the load off Dariax now that he no longer is getting sick from it, or do you think like, I made this deal, so I need to be the one that's in control of this?
I don't think it's so overt that he's like, I made this deal, so now I need to work it out. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's like I don't want to like Mephisto this, but I think part of it is like you have this item that's made you extremely ill, not just like I feel queasy, but like so sick that I'm vomiting like this dark bile esque stuff that now you're seemingly immune to. I'm sure there's a bit of a rush of excitement around like, I don't want to say like newfound power, but like comfortability with it of like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm okay with not, I'm not just okay with carrying it, but I'm a bit earnest in like now I get to carry it. But I also think that I do think there's a subtle manipulation happening here where the crown is affecting him, where he is feeling a comfortability with the idea of not necessarily handing it over to Pasca, but basically getting rid of it. And he's even being told by Dariax as they're talking about like potential group names. They're really Dariax especially is saying like, yeah, we need a group leader, and Dorian, you're our leader.
Yeah.
And so his I don't want to say his ego's being stroked because he hasn't been a very egocentric character, but I would understand him feeling a greater sense of responsibility to the circlet of being told, hey, you're a leader. You're a big part of this group, and him also thinking about the future of the group, wanting to protect them. That's my very long-winded way of saying, yeah, I don't think it's just, hey, I'll carry it. I do think there are a lot of other factors in play there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just interesting that like part of me is wondering like on a meta level, like above the game a little bit, like if Abria gave them any type of like notes about like, hey, this circlet is influencing you, like subtly or whatever, right? And so like I like if that is like to inform their character choices at all, or if this is just pure like on Robbie's end to, kind of do this. Because I agree that it is intentional and um that it is like the crown's influence on him, right?
Mhm.
And it's like we've been seeing, especially this episode, the influence of it like kind of seeping into everyone's dreams. And I think it was in the second night of camping where like they started seeing spiders everywhere. Like
Right,
Ted had some on her arm, and I think I don't remember who noticed it, but like it was mentioned that there were lots of spiders in all the trees like around them and
right.
stuff. So its influence is clearly like getting stronger and seeping further in.
Do you think
Um,
it's because they're pretty much in the middle of nowhere? I mean, is it now that they're away from civilization that it's the loudest, so to speak, or is it more like time, like longevity? We've been around it so long that now it's becoming, so to speak, louder and louder.
I think the latter. I think both, but leaning more toward the latter. That it's like they've spent an increasing amount of time with it. And as her presence is even just becoming louder. Like literally speaking to all of, well, not all of them, but a lot of them in their dreams, and making them offers and stuff. Like, yeah, I think. And where we are, which this is a whole other conversation. I don't know if we're ready to get to that yet, but where we are might play into it as well because we're seemingly in like these mystical, for lack of a better word,
Right.
like ruins that there seems to be it fey energy or at least just some type of energy that's like perpetuating this whole place. So maybe that is amplifying it or something. Um, I do have more on that, but I want to try to hold that for
Yeah,
now until we finish this.
it does seem like the circlet's definitely affecting them, and it's gone from like dreams of spiders or seeing spiders to now full blown conversations. Which, Dariax, who's sort of been the lovable idiot, is visibly shaken by his dream. And man, Robbie did such a great job acting his dream with maybe the Spider Queen or the Circlet. I don't know which one it is, but um, the tension between the party is
Yes.
most is what I'm most apprehensive about. I mean, you have Dorian basically blatantly being like, you have this person, fy'ra, who has shown up, wasn't asked to show up, but sort of put herself out there to protect the party, has done nothing but try to do what's in the best interest of the party. And Dorian makes it very clear, hey, you're not one of us. Like, you're not part of the group. And even so much as we see Dorian and Orem have, I mean, the moment where Orem says, give it to the dwarf or we're going to have a problem. I mean, I
Yeah.
leaned forward. I was like,
I was
okay,
like, oh shit, it's going down.
I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
And they even get very catty with each other where Dorian says, basically, well, this whole thing's your fault because the one way we had to get rid of the circlet, you got rid of that option because you sent the note in the box, which Gilmore had given them a box that you could send the circlet back in, only had one use, and they decided to send a note saying, basically, the Thieves Guild, the Nameless Ones, were looking for him.
Yeah.
And so Dorian points out twice, actually, hey, Orem, remember, this whole thing's your fault.
Right.
So we're seeing some inter-party drama that for a party that's, they woke up episode 1, like immediately liking each other, coming off this party together, believing the best in each other, to now there's some actual strife and tension between them.
Yeah, and I think it's even mentioned that like I think Abria like mentioned kind of that Robbie felt some type of way about it. And I think that's also the Spider Queen's influence, right? Like she might be kind of festering this, what's the word, like distrust or strife
Right.
between them. But I was thinking about it when you said that, and Orem's kind of been like the moral compass or like the steadfast
Sure.
in his values the whole time. And I was just thinking about it. He's the only one that did not get, well, besides fy'ra, he's the only one that did not get like approached by the Spider
Right.
Queen, and I guess that's because of his alignment. But it's just, and I thought that moment with, even though it was really like tense, that was such a great moment. And Liam like played so well to his character, being like, we're gonna have a problem. You need to give that back. And I just like that he still is kind of that like that grounded center force for this party, and is like trying to guard them in that way. Um, but
He's a very wholesome character. Like,
yeah,
you can't help but root for him. I mean, there's just something admirable about him that you just get behind. And even in his conversation with the voice in the jungle at the runestone, when he's asked, will you go deeper for more knowledge? And he says, will it help my friends? And she says, maybe yes, or something to that effect. And he says, for him, I will. For them, I will.
yeah,
We don't necessarily know who he is, but he's very clearly a courageous, noble. I mean, you just can't help but root for him, which makes me so angry that we only have 3 more episodes with him. I love all these characters, man. I just can't imagine not seeing them again.
I know. Me too. They've quickly grown very, very attached.
Yeah.
I've quickly grown very attached. But yeah, since you just said that while we're here, I caught that too. I was about to bring that up. The fact that he said, "For him I will, for them I will." So clearly, he had a similar moment in one of the early episodes where he referred to a her, and we postulated that that was Keyleth, and it ended up being her. So that for him I will, to me it says like that's his partner, like his significant other.
Mhm.
And just to get this out there in case it happens to be right, I do think that his character Aura might be connected to another character named Derek. Derek, I might be saying it wrong, who's from another one shot that they've done years ago. And I just think it'd be super interesting if that is who it was. So had to get that prediction out there while we were talking about it.
I have no idea who you're referring to, but if this ends up being true, I hate YouTube for I was here for the journey, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who that. It's obviously a big. I've seen some interesting Reddit comments on maybe this individual is the premise for why he seemingly left the Arashari, whether it was by choice or by force, or maybe a self-imposed exile or something. I think that's what's challenging about an 8-episode arc is we're clearly not going to get every answer to every question we have, and we may not fully know his backstory
Right.
in the constraints of the next 3 episodes. But again, going back to Orem, I think you said it really well. He's definitely he's the grounded moral force of the group.
Mhm.
And it does make you wonder without his presence in the group, really where this campaign would have gone.
Yeah.
Because he's been, even though Dariax has sort of lovingly pointed to Dorian as you're the leader, Orem's really kind of the dad who is really pressing them forward and keeping them in tune, I guess, with what they should be doing.
Yeah, and for my money, I would say Orem's the leader. I think Dariax just kind of looks up to Dorian, and so that's why he always.
Yeah, I think it's like
him.
best friend, like you're awesome, man. Totally, yeah, I agree.
But yeah, who knows? I mean, I feel like the campaign would have taken a completely different direction because they probably just would have worked with Posca, like because he was the one that kind of was pushing them away from that. But yeah, man, okay. I'm gonna slightly transition here, unless there's something else you had on that. Okay, so still on Dorian though. When he has that dream that he ends up changing his alignment and making that kind of deal with the Spider Queen to get his memories back. Well, first and foremost, that the dream I think was a memory. That's kind of how it was played. That with
right.
fy'ra like getting grasped by those tendrils, because he says like I try to like go help her, or he says something to that effect at the beginning of the dream. And Abria's like, you feel kind of like a pushback because that's not what happened. So to me, that says like, oh, this is like he's looking at a memory.
Right.
And then at the end of this sequence, when she ends up ultimately fixing his memories and he remembers a being in the Feywild with fy'ra. And so I'm imagining, we don't have details, but fy'ra does some sort of like sacrifice play or enables them to escape. So I'm imagining that might be the last thing he saw, like as they were leaving. Like he saw fy'ra getting like grabbed by these tendrils or whatever. And so, while we do have some answers now that they were all in the Feywild together and all of them escaped except her, we still don't know the why of any of that. Like, why were they there? What was going on? What is grasping fy'ra? Is it Spider Queen? I didn't really get that vibe, but maybe. But what was super interesting to me was I'm trying to remember the context of how it was brought up, but I think it was when the Spider Queen was like, I need a champion," and Dorian's like, "Well, you know, not me or my friends," and they specifically bring up fy'ra, and the Spider Queen's like, "Oh no, I don't want her. She's tied up with something like older and meaner than me."
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay.
Ominous. Yeah.
And so this is all leading up to like a question that we can maybe speculate here. Do you think what she meant by that was whatever was holding her like in that memory, or do you think it was like whatever she's talking to and stuff, like when she like uses her gift?
I think the most direct answer is it's the gift. It's the person she's talking to, who seemingly is potentially the same individual who's also asking the party, "Why are you here and what are you doing?" It doesn't seem to line up though with how that individual, that god, so to speak, has been characterized, in that a bit more playful and curious rather than nefarious. So that makes me wonder, is this figure more than meets the eye? Or is it, like you said, there's something totally different, i.e. this shadowy force that she's wrapped up in? I actually wonder if that memory wasn't fy'ra, but she mentions a twin sister who died. If it was even fy'ra Kai that he's remembering being consumed and eventually killed, and that fy'ra is just privy to knowing what happened.
That
That's
would be
one
interesting.
under the table theory that I have that I'm not fully certain about.
That's super interesting. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, they're twins, so I mean, it could be. And the while we're talking about it, the voice that spoke to them in the jungle and is seemingly the entity that fy'ra is communicating with. We are revealed that it is Melora, the Wild Mother, toward like the end somewhere in there. Like she's like, I'm a goddess, and
Yeah,
but
I heard it said, but I didn't catch it fully. Is this a previous character?
it's like a god, one of the gods.
Okay.
Um, which I don't know though, especially given what we were just speculating about this older and meaner entity, is that I'm not convinced that it really is the Wild Mother, meaning that either fy'ra and this entity are lying, or maybe fy'ra is also being manipulated and just this
Mm.
entity is lying. But I don't know, because it's the and I know Matt's not the DM anymore, but thus far in all like Critical Role and stuff, the gods, like the real gods, i.e., the Wild Mother Melora, have never been that like direct or chatty, like it's always more subtle, like dreams, and not with like the literal god like speaking to you conversationally. So I mean, here we have a Brienne, so maybe this is just her style. She's not,
Mm.
she's just more direct. But it could also mean that maybe this isn't the Wild Mother, and maybe this is
Oh,
this like an entity that is manipulating fy'ra, or everyone that like lives in these woods or
this is
something.
a Tyrael and Bale type situation from Diablo 2, where he thinks it's Tyrael.
Yeah, exactly. Because and if it's not the Wild Mother and it's this entity that's like lying to them, like trying to trick them into coming into its domain or whatever the case may be, then that would kind of line up with the Spider Queen being like, oh, that one's mixed with something way worse than me. Um, if she was referring to this Wild Mother that's not really the Wild Mother. I don't know. We're getting into Mephistoing kind of like what if territory, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not convinced. Because I don't know. It's just there's a lot of strange things about all the circumstance to me.
Yeah, and it was interesting Fy'ra as they got to the runestone. I mean, it's almost like her grabbing her popcorn, so to speak, and like watching it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like she knows this test is going to happen.
Yeah.
Because she preps them even as like she can see them all having like their individual sort of conversations, so to speak, with this character.
Yeah.
And she's sort of smiling and seeing it happen. And even when the crocodile comes out, she's very hesitant to jump in. It's kind of like, do I really need to get involved in this?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It it's like it's both. She seems to be very comfortable with this presence she's engaging with, but also, like you said, yeah. I mean, I don't know the other interactions from the previous campaigns, but there is a bit of a dissonance there between the character and the interactions we're seeing, and maybe how we would frame this Wild Mother in our own mind, compared to this dark, nefarious figure that even Lolth is. The Spider Queen is saying, "Oh yeah, it's much worse than me." So I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that obviously wasn't nothing, right? Like that, you don't just say that for no reason. Like that, I feel like that was a clue to something, that there's something going on with Fy'ra. Maybe that really is the Wild Mother, and maybe okay, I'm kind of shifting to a different possibility here. What's going on with Fy'ra? She apparently I keep using the word sacrifice. We don't know that she died, but
Right,
she did something to enable the rest of them to escape, and they've all
right.
forgotten this. So how did she then escape? How is she here now? Has she made, if that is the Wild Mother and everything's on the up and up, maybe then she has now made a pact with some devil that's far worse than the Spider Queen in order to come back and like try to protect them again from
Mhm.
something. Is she from the future too? We have a dark
Oh
fern that's
yeah,
seemingly from the future, and we have the Fy'ra who is
yeah.
seemingly knows more than she's letting on. How does she know these things? And
Well, and she even jumps out when Darkfern comes out and basically says, "You're not going to mess with this party." Like she's in tune enough to like because she even mentions that that's not like the moment that she's actually been following them. She basically says, "I've been watching you guys for a while."
right.
And it makes me want to go back and watch previous episodes where there's sort of a perception check for things outside the camp or in the distance or what have you.
Hmm.
Makes me wonder if maybe that was fy'ra watching them. We always assumed it was Pasca, but
Yeah.
she does basically say, "I've been watching you for a while." She seems to imply that she sort of, I don't say woke up one day and was just somewhere, but for all the, it's interesting that she decides to jump in when she does, because she even says earlier that she was going to jump in and help, but when Pasca and their group was surrounding them,
Yeah.
but basically points to Fern and says, "Hey, I didn't have to because of your charm person." So it's interesting with Dark Fern how when the combat hasn't even started yet, she has the sense of this is serious enough to immediately jump in, immediately help, and feel this sort of duty to protect the party. It's weird, especially that her knowing what happened, that she wouldn't be direct and just say, "Hey guys, you guys don't remember this, but here's what
Yeah.
happened." That part is strange to me.
Yeah. Why is she hiding that?
Right.
Unless they're, I'm not trying to go too crazy here, but unless there are like she's from the future and can't like can only alter what's gonna happen in so many ways or something. But
It makes me wonder if she is from the future, which we talked last episode about, like now we're getting shenanigans of like time travel and all the
yeah.
the cumbersome dialogue around that. But if we're seeing the party that I'm trying to think how to say this. If the party is on its way to its own doom, maybe it's kind of one of those things where like the person's from the future and they can't say how you're going to die,
Hmm.
but they want to be as involved as, or I think of like Doctor Strange with Iron Man. Like if I tell you, it won't happen.
Yeah.
Maybe she is a bit aware of future events. Because isn't like time? Isn't there some kind of time effect in the Feywild anyway? Like maybe she
Hmm.
has seen the fate of the party and she's actively trying to prevent that without overtly being like, "Hey guys, this happens a week from now. Um, Dorian, don't put that crown on. Dariax, don't eat that pie. It's gonna make you feel real sick." I don't know.
I don't either, man. And it's like I don't know. I feel on one hand kind of crazy to even speculating time travel, but on the other hand, I feel like there are some breadcrumbs there. And my best guess right now, and I don't know about the Wild Mother yet. I don't really know how I feel, but my best guess is that she made some sort of deal with something, and that is how she escaped from whatever situation she got herself in order to let the rest of them free. And maybe it sent her back in time, or maybe there's no time travel involved, but it has now just like poofed her back to her friends. I don't know, but
Maybe it's the War Queen.
yeah, it could be.
Seems like an important enough character to not mention again. But then again, that could be a setup for CR3. Excuse
But
me, Campaign 3.
what's interesting though is if she did make some sort of deal with the devil, right? Then like, what is it? What is the devil's true plan here? Like if she's being manipulated, then the reason she's there is not to actually help them. Probably it's like might
Right.
be to set things in motion that I don't know. But one thing on this is I'm trying to find the exact quote is you mentioned it in the recap, but it's after like the tension with Dorian and
Yeah.
everyone else, and she says, she's reaching out to that thing she speaks to, and she says, "Please, I know he has changed. I know he will not make that same decision twice." Which that kind of speaks to the future, maybe like some decision he made in a past time loop that that's what they're trying to change this time, or does she just somehow know about the deal he just made with the Spider Queen, and that's what she's talking about?
I love this question this question. I love this line from her because it's a line that has so much depth to it. Because I think my immediate thought when she said it was she was just intuitive to he did something in his dream that's changed him, and she's sort of pleading to, her deity or whatever, like, have pity on him, because he was the only one who was a bit more aggressive and even threatening with the Wild Mother. It does make you wonder, did something happen in the past that caused her to have to sacrifice herself? Or is she aware of something that will happen in the future that she's trying to help avoid? I don't know. There's a lot more to Dorian in her interaction than meets the eye.
Yeah, there is. And one possibility I was thinking is that, like, since we were privy to that exact memory, which, he was shown in his dream of fy'ra getting tangled up it's presumably the memory of, like, as he's leaving, like, that's what he sees. Maybe the decision was that he left and didn't, like, try to help.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So, like, maybe that, he won't abandon me again. Like, this time he'll make the right choice and, like, try to save me before he leaves or something. I don't know.
I have this really sinking feeling that Dorian is on the way to being, maybe evil's too strong a word, but losing himself. Um, he's been the feel good, the bard in the previous 3 episodes. And now, this episode's very interesting in that he's tense, he's paranoid, he's a bit challenging with Orym and fy'ra. I'm really uncomfortable with where his character's going. And you and I talked about this a little bit, but Robbie, the actor who's playing him, tweeted out, actually, and maybe this is Mephistoing, I don't know, tweeted out, how does a character play a villain?
Oh, yeah.
And says, you don't, he basically paraphrasing, he basically says, you don't make like this overly cliched, like nefarious, like, ha ha ha, cackling bad dude, but you actually simply play a human who's making real decisions and real choices that they personally believe is right. It gave me a very much like a Thanos vibe to his tweet. And it made me wonder, are we seeing, does Robbie above the table know where the story goes? I mean, is it truly a on its own 8-episode arc, or is this feeding and setting up something for campaign 3? And some of the voice actors are a bit in the know on, hey, this is the direction. The journey is a bit up in the air in terms of how you guys get here, but some of the major plot points that are going to happen, is one of them him being eventually corrupted and becoming, I don't know, man. And maybe now's a good point to mention the text you sent me on. Are the characters of EXU going to become the big bad evil people for campaign 3? I don't know.
Yeah, for reference, I saw this meme and it was like, this is an obscure meme, you probably aren't familiar with it, but it's like the comic of the guy wearing a shirt and it says "No fear," and then the next comic panel is like somebody saying something and they say, what if the cast of EXU is being set up as the big bads of CR3? And then the next panel is the shirt says "One fear" instead of "No fear." But I mean, that would be crazy, and it's definitely like on the table. I don't think that's an impossibility, but I don't know. I don't really like believe that, but
I'm visibly upset and apprehensive at this, because I've really fallen in love with these characters so quickly. Like, they're just great. They're acted well, they're fun. And the idea of them descending into madness and becoming evil, I mean, that is so unsettling. I mean, it'd be amazing for campaign 3 in terms of a setup, but I hope that's not where we're heading. And I don't say I hope that in terms of like, as like a critic, like I hope that's not what they're going to do. Just personally, I just hope
yeah.
that's not going to be the case.
And I think you brought up a good point that if that is, and not that exactly, but if something like that is what's happening, then I think it would have taken meta knowledge, right? Like Abria would have had to tell them before they started that, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Like, I think I briefly mentioned this earlier about, like, did Abria like tell them that, the Spider Queen's presence would be influencing them and to like use that to inform their decisions? Um, but if the goal of the show is to end up with, be it Dorian or be it whatever, like as an evil big bad, like he would have to have been told that, right? Like
Right.
you can't just count on that to happen organically. And not that they wouldn't do that, but I do feel like that's kind of like, and I mean, who knows? This is a new DM, new series. Like maybe they're trying different things, but that would be really like the antithesis to what like they've
Yeah.
had D&D be so far.
A bit overhanded, a little
Yeah.
bit, a little forced.
So, but I will
Oh.
say, I mean, it is possible because like this isn't Critical Role Campaign 3. It's this new thing. So maybe they're trying something like that. But the one thing that makes me lean into it not being that is the fact that Abria, like in the moment at the table, was like, "Hey, above the game right now, would you really do this?" So like, that was like a
Right.
surprise to her in that moment, like,
Yeah.
and not something that seemingly was planned if she had to ask him that. But
I,
go ahead.
I'm just so impressed with Abria and Robbie both. I mean, Abria so quickly playing on this dialogue and these responses from Robbie, and then Robbie internalizing. He's never played D&D before. He's internalizing this. Okay, now you're chaotic neutral, and he doesn't like suddenly play it as like this. He's just great at showing that subtle difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much prep he went into before this episode, but I mean, you and I joked before we hit record on like the critics of the show and like some people being really obnoxious about, I hate it. One thing I've seen is just universal praise for Robbie, and I think every episode he's really earned that.
Yeah, he's killed it. And like you said, all the new people have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, super impressed, especially if there was no meta direction, which I don't think there was, but especially if there wasn't, like what great like on the fly like nuance and acting to do in that moment, to like just already on your toes immediately be making those changes to the character. Not I don't know. I'm not saying this right, but yes, very impressive from Robbie. Especially for having never played D&D before. I did see that some people were kind of upset by that moment that Abria like asking him that out of game, and they're like, she shouldn't have. That's not like how this game works. Like Robbie, like she maybe should have asked, hey, make a persuasion or a deception based on, you know, what if like if you're being earnest or if you're trying to lie. But I didn't really have a problem with it.
Yeah, I don't know how much time we should dedicate to this. Like what I'm about to say, I don't know if this is like a full blown like section or if it's just like a comment, but I think for people who love D&D, and you said this a second ago when we were talking about like the meta, like where does this go? And you said it's kind of the antithesis of, you said Critical Role, but it's also a bit opposite of what D&D is, which is this open, sprawling world that you're sort of on this journey of discovery and imagination, and it can go pretty much anywhere. It's like, you want to do this, you can do it. It's kind of like what excites us most about the game is like what's going to happen.
Right.
I think also with that, people have to understand that also what makes D&D special is the person who's in control of the table, the DM, the GM, whatever terminology you want to use, is going to bring their personality, their personal flavor.
Right.
I think Matt Mercer is amazing. I think that we're a bit unfair when we talk about Matt Mercer because he's so well loved at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the tables were turned and Matt Mercer was coming in for like week one after a really big show, if people would show him the same criticism that they're showing Abria. Because Matt has his own personal style. He has his own take on how he does things. And some people love that and not everyone does. And I think sometimes we're being a bit unfair to Abria on like that comment you just said of like, that's not how it should be done.
Mm-hmm.
There's no book in the player's handbook. There's no page in the player's handbook that says, here's how you narrate, dialoguing around alignment. And so I think for us as viewers, it's important for us to recognize the difference between like the core principles of the game and our preferences for how we like to play the game.
Yeah.
Because this is absolutely a preference thing. And I think the sooner we divide those things out, the easier it becomes for us to just enjoy the show.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, that's different than how I would do it. and that just being it, rather than that's different how I would do it, and I don't like it, and it means this. And yeah, I'm so angry about it. I had zero issues with that scene. I had zero issues with how she ran it, but at the same time, I'm recognizing this is her game to run. Why would I try to be so strong armed with it must be like this? And it's just how people just are that way. I mean, you and I have joked about DMs in the past who are like, my job's to kill the player. That is just how someone approaches the game, and everyone's going to have a different preference. I think we have to be comfortable with that. End rant.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I agree. I didn't think it was anything to be upset by. But that very impactful moment to perhaps the entire campaign. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. Yeah, I know we kind of talked about this last episode about who we thought maybe would be the one to put on the crown ultimately. I think we were both kind of leaning Opal at the time. Are you now Team Dorian?
Oh my gosh. All right. So this is a great question. If I can rant and spiel again here. I think Dorian's the clearest option. I think he's the clearest option in terms of being tempted to put it on. I think Orym is the caveat to that. I don't know if Orym will let him put it on. I think he's the most aware
He's got his eye on him.
Yeah. I still think Dariak's out of stupidity putting it on is a possibility. Opal is still a possibility if she comes to terms with if Ted's really dead or gone or something. I could see that happening. Fern seems to have sort of conquered her temptation a bit in this last episode, where she sees Dark Fern and says, I don't think I like this version of me.
Yeah.
And then I think fy'ra is a nonsense answer. I don't think fy'ra is ever going to put it on. Maybe Orym out of
like
saving the party.
Play?
Yeah, maybe. I don't necessarily see his character doing that because he's clearly aware of how evil an item is. But all that to say, I think Dorian is the clearest option, followed up by Dariax. What do you think?
Yeah, the Fern thing interests me, and I'm probably reading too much into this because of the whole time travel aspect, which again we don't know if that truly was Fern from the future that was in the gateway or not. But if it is time travel, then we would be led to believe that would inevitably who puts it on, right? Because that moment has to happen. I don't know. I'm getting into the weeds of time travel, so I still think Fern's on the table, though I do agree that she just conquered the temptation in that dream sequence she had, but I don't think she's 100% in the clear yet. The thing with Dorian is we clearly have these whole moments in this episode, and he's clear his alignment has changed. But for him, it wasn't about putting it on; it was about giving it to Posca, right? So, and maybe now that he's kind of taken the first step on this path, additional steps will lead to him ultimately wanting to put it on, like as the Spider Queen gets her influence in him deeper. But for now, it's just about giving it away to Posca. So for me, I kind of still thinking Opal might be the most likely to put it on, just because, she even said that I think it was last episode that she was looking at it and she made up her mind, and there was just some something she said about recognizing that as a potential move she could make. But so yeah, I'd say Opal, and then Dorian is a second place for me.
Definitely seems like we're heading that way. There's been a lot of foreshadowing that someone in the party is going to eventually put it on. Two things. One, I don't see Dorian's line of reasoning of giving it to Posca panning out, since the Spider Queen basically says, while it's interesting to have her as a champion, I think she says she wouldn't be here in time, or she's too far away, which that's a bit interesting in terms of what's with the sense of urgency, I guess.
I missed that. I didn't catch that. That was a thing.
Because it's at the end of the dream where he says, yes, I really would give you Posca. And she's intrigued by it, but basically says, Posca's not anywhere near here. So that wouldn't work out.
I thought, and I don't remember, but let's just see if this rings any bells for you, that he was I'll get it to Posca. And I thought the Spider Queen said oh, don't worry about that. She's coming to you. You don't need to go get her. So it was more of she was saying no to you don't have to go seek her out. She's coming. So to me, I thought Posca was like the Spider Queen was like on board with that decision.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to go back and watch it. It does, story wise, it does seem like we wouldn't be done with Posca. It does
Mhm.
seem like she'd be, on her way en route.
Yeah.
We'll have to go back. I'll have to go back and check it out. The VOD isn't up yet. We'll have to go back and check out that point in particular, and see what the case is.
Yeah.
But it does seem like someone's going to put it on, and I don't think it's going to be Posca. I think it's going to be someone in the party. We still had that question in the last episode of the seed. The seed begins to grow.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I don't know
Should
if
we
you have
jump
more
there?
insight. Yeah,
No,
if you have
no.
more
Let's.
insight on that.
Are you talking about Murata?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's we get her in the stinger, and she's got that residuum spike, and I think she uses it, right?
Yeah. So does she use it on herself?
I think my understanding, and we don't, I guess we don't know, but my understanding was that she used it on the ground, and she's where the party is, like, right? She's in those ruins, and I think Abria, I don't remember the exact wordage, but she says like the jungle shudders or something, right? Does that
Yeah.
sound familiar?
No.
So,
It was so wild to me, the end of it, because I think she also says that she was like bleeding or bruised or something, which I don't know if I misheard that as well.
okay, wait, I found it here. I'll just read it real quick.
Okay.
Murata Nicelor is broken, bloodied, and undeterred. But what is one more life when there is so much more to be gained? She pulls out a residuum crystal spike from her purple cloak. The Laura's jungle, this sacred place, shudders. So I get it doesn't say that she slams it in the ground, but the fact that she like said that the place shuddered, in my mind I imagined her like using it. And we still don't really know what those do. They cleaned up magic, but in my mind, like she has now set these all up around these ruins, this jungle, which there's apparently more than meets the eye to, right? I think that we'll just call it the Wild Mother, even though we're not convinced that it might be her. But the
Yeah.
Wild Mother says that like, no, these ruins are a lie. Like there's stuff in here. So maybe like placing these crystals is going to like reveal the truth, or like if there is some sort of like weirdness going on now that the crystals are there, like the jig is up or something. I don't know.
Why is she broken and bloodied? And what's up with the comment on what's one more life? If there's so much, I mean, who she killed? I mean, was it her teammates? Is she corrupted? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, okay. Let's piece this out. And is one final thing, is this who Ted's looking at?
In when she sees Ted looking at someone?
Yeah, because there's two references of like
Yeah.
Ted in the abyss wherever Ted exists, that Ted's like looking at someone that's looking at
Right.
her. And
Right.
and it's mentioned in the last part that that person's wearing purple, and here we're
Right.
told that Murata is wearing purple. So
Yeah. I think it's safe to say in the second reference, do you see the woman in the purple cloak? I think it's safe enough, I assume, to say that's Murata that she's referencing. The first one's interesting and would also seem to make sense that she's seeing the same character.
right, which would maybe lead this all back to tie together, is that Murata, and when they first met, what's the word? Psychically invaded Opal's mind, and
Mhm.
that's when Opal was talking to Ted. So Murata saw whatever that is, and so maybe that for some reason has set Murata on this quest that she's on now, and maybe a piece of her is still in Opal's mind, and that's why Ted's like looking at her or something. That's my best guess. I don't understand what vendetta or what like divine purpose she now like feels because of Ted's presence or whatever it may be. Like, and now to go further down the hole, I think Ted's real. I think Ted is her sister. But
Right.
if it's not, maybe Murata recognized that there is this evil entity that is like influencing this girl, and she's trying to stop it. I mean, I don't know. It's just what's one more life when there's so much at stake? Like, what's at stake? I don't know.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if Murata's maybe not necessarily a something's happened where now she's like this corrupted evil character, but maybe more of a, in her mind, doing what's best for the world, and I'll even kill a good guy to save other people.
Yeah.
I do think, and what I'm piecing together is when Opal looks inside herself and sees Ted looking at someone else, I do wonder if that's the moment where Murata is looking into Opal's mind and sees Ted and sort of comes face to face with Ted. If that's maybe what she's seeing, I don't know. I think I agree with you. I think Ted's real. We know that people of Byrodham were like, yep, she left right after you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ted is likely dead. Like we said in a previous episode, that maybe she made a deal of some kind and now she's sort of Opal's patron. I don't think Ted is directly evil. I do think it's possible that she's made a deal with something evil, and Murata maybe senses that, sees that, or maybe, I feel like we're running in circles here. Maybe Murata's just evil. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And the fact that the but is what is one more life? I don't know if she referring to herself? Like, is she sacrificing herself in this moment to?
She's obviously been through something.
Yeah.
Like, there was a sense of apprehension when they left them in the previous episode that they were leaving them with the Fae Gate that we just saw send out this dark fern and potentially other, bad creatures.
Yeah.
And we are left with this sort of sense of apprehension on, hey, don't go through the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, okay. And so you do kind of wonder, did they go through it? Did they try to go through it? Have they been changed? I mean, does she now want the crown? I don't know.
Yeah.
Have we seen the residuum spikes in a previous campaign, by the way?
No.
Okay.
If we have, I don't remember. We've seen residuum a lot, but not in this crystal spike form. I don't believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're not supposed to know the answer to these questions, obviously, but yeah, I'm curious. Just in the fact that I think I'm getting vibes that she maybe killed her whole team.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too. She killed her whole team for sure. That's what I'm thinking.
So yeah, she was either corrupted by the gate if she went through it, or maybe when she entered Opal's mind, was able to see what's going on with Ted. Maybe that got to her. But something. So I can't wait to see like what happens with this jungle, because like, is it really the Wild Mother? And maybe it's not, and maybe Murata somehow knows that, and she's going to stop this entity that's tricking people into thinking it's the Wild Mother. Or maybe it's any of the other 6 things we just said. But
right. So we have 3 episodes left. What are your predictions on where this goes?
Bro, I don't know. Like, is this all connected to the ash hole? Like, what's going on there? Like, we've got seemingly the Spider Queen that's gonna come to fruition in some form or another. But do you think the Spider Queen is connected to the ash hole? Because I didn't.
No, I think the ash hole is sort of like the running stable plot thread. Like, this is our mission, but really this is a story about the party and their interactions with the Spider Queen. I think everything else is just an extra plot thread, which it can feel, I think, a little bit like spaghetti, where all these, like, you just keep adding more noodles to the pot. For me, I think there has to be like a level of comfort. You have to find yourself a little bit comfortable with the idea of, yes, here's some added threads and they add to the story, but they're not necessarily what the story is about.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think she's responsible for the ash hole. I don't know if we're even going to get full a neatly tied ending to the ash hole. I do think I do think we're ultimately heading to something happening with the circlet.
I agree. I think the astral. I think there's something will happen with the astral too. I'm not saying it'll be like whatever that is behind that. I'm not saying that gets fully resolved, but I think that like there's more to the astral plot thread, like, because we're in these ruins to
Yeah.
seemingly decipher something, and there's more going on in the ruins than we're even aware of. So like, yeah, it feels like there's like kind of three big things that are going on. But I definitely think, to answer your question, that something's gonna happen with the circlet. Someone's gonna put it on. That's gonna come to a head.
Yeah.
And maybe it involves time travel. Like maybe in that moment, like everything goes to shit. And I
Yeah.
guess they have to go to the Feywild at some point. Wait, no, I don't know. They don't have to, but we still don't know why they were there.
Yeah. We're heading to that being revealed. I think also there has to be like a level of understanding that like we're seeing world building happening in real time, and that this is the world of Exandria. There's a lot of content that happens in this world. So like I saw one comment that was like, okay, well, if the ruins of Crenera are this 1 million person population, which is like 10 times or 100 times bigger than anything else in Exandria,
Yeah.
why would they introduce this just to like try to resolve it? And I remember thinking like, I don't know if they're necessarily going to. I think some of these plot threads are just adding to the world of Exandria,
Agreed.
and not necessarily going to be resolved in 3 episodes. And I think us as the viewers, I think realizing that sort of takes the burden off of us of wondering how do each of these plot points get resolved.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. We only have 3 episodes left.
Do you think there's anyone who doesn't make it out alive in these next 3
Man,
episodes?
I think it's definitely possible, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like fy'ra is like, I don't know if I really believe in the time travel or not, but if that's what's going on, I feel like she's almost like doomed. Like
It
she
does seem that
always
way.
dies or something, like
But she's such a great character.
she
She's
is.
so Anjali, I can't remember her last name.
Imani,
Does
I
a great
think.
job. Yeah, I can't remember anyone's last name except for Matt Mercer. Yeah, I think you said it really well. It does feel like her character's doomed.
So many questions. We actually got some answers, but I feel like we opened as many more new questions.
I feel like we always, I said this like every episode, but I feel like we always end the show with, I don't know, man.
I don't know.
And then we always say, hey, you viewers, you guys who are watching, if you have a theory, you have an insight of your own, definitely drop it into the comments. Let us know. We love interacting with people who are watching the Pixelists podcast. And especially if you have some really awesome moments that you loved from the Critical Role show, let us know down below or tweet at us at PXLists. Which, by the way, Will, is there anything else we wanted to talk about?
I don't think so, man.
I should have asked that before I did my little spiel on check out our Twitter.
No, I think we covered all the big stuff.
Well, the important thing to say is it Thursday yet? Because man, I'm so ready.
I know, me too. Just a few more days.
That's right.
But
3 more days.
If that's it, we just got to do our thumbnail.
That's right.
I actually have an idea this week.
Okay. What's your idea?
Do some back to back, like Dariax and Dorian.
So yeah. Which way do I turn for your camera?
You need to go the other way.
This way?
Yeah.
All right. I'll do my gun too.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
You guys are weird.
We know.
All right. Well, for everybody listening, thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. And other than that, I think we'll catch you later.
Yep. Bye,
Deuces.
everybody.